Hey guys, tonight we're not opening a fridge or scrolling through a food delivery app. Instead, you're standing in an ancient home, stomach growling and realizing that what's for dinner might actually be a life or death question. There's no pizza guy, no microwaves. And brace yourself, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what's the local time for you right now? Drop it in the comments. I always get a kick out of seeing who's awake at 2 a.m. on the other side of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You look down at the table in front of you, though table might be a generous word. It's more like a wooden plank balanced on uneven legs, wobbling whenever you press a hand to it. The surface is empty, not even a crumb. In ancient times, empty tables were common. Meals weren't waiting, hot and ready, at a scheduled time. They arrived late, they arrived missing things, and sometimes they didn't arrive at all. Hunger wasn't a rare inconvenience, it was the backdrop of life. Your stomach growls echoing in the quiet room. Outside you can hear distant sounds, animals bleating, a pot clanging, someone shouting for water. Everyone is busy, everyone is tired, and yet somehow, preparing food takes center stage. Not because it's glamorous, but because survival insists on it. You imagine sitting here in the household of a Roman laborer or an Egyptian farmer. Before anyone eats, hours of effort go into making even the simplest dish. Someone has to grind grain, fetch water, gather wood, stoke fires, chop herbs, all before a single bite. And here you are, used to instant noodles, suddenly appreciating that instant never existed back then. The smell of smoke drifts in, faint but comforting. Somewhere someone has started a fire. You realize the first step to eating isn't food, it's flame. Without fire, the grain stays hard, the meat stays raw, and your dinner remains nothing more than a sad pile of ingredients. Fire is life, and yet fire is also dangerous. A spark too wild, a pot tipped over, and the whole house could go up in smoke. Cooking wasn't just an everyday activity, it was a gamble. You lean back, picturing the scene. Women crouched near clay ovens, men returning from fields with sacks of wheat. Children sent to fetch jars of water from a nearby well. Meals don't just happen. They're fought for, gathered, and guarded. It makes sense now why bread becomes sacred. Why breaking bread feels like more than just eating. It's survival turned ritual. A thought creeps in. The odd thing about ancient eating is that you're never truly full. Even in wealthy households, abundance came with season and circumstance. Grain spoiled, wine soured, meat rotted quickly in the heat. Salt was the hero of preservation, yet expensive and unevenly distributed. Most of the time, people lived closer to hunger than to satiety. You shift uncomfortably at the empty table. The hunger in your belly feels heavier now, as if you're really sitting there, waiting for a meal that may or may not fill you. You remember that in ancient Greece, philosophers once debated not just the meaning of life, but also what the ideal meal should be. Scholars still argue whether those debates were genuine reflections on diet or just excuses for wealthy men to feel better about overeating. The irony is almost funny. While grand thinkers argued about moderation, the majority of people just prayed there would be something to eat tomorrow. Your ears pick up another sound, the thump of a grinding stone. Someone is preparing flour. That slow, repetitive scrape fills the air like a heartbeat. It's not fast, it's not efficient, but it's steady. And in that steady rhythm lies hope. Tonight there will at least be bread. The fire outside cracks louder, and soon smoke curls through the doorway. The room thickens with its scent, rich with the promise of food. Your stomach growls again, but this time the sound feels almost satisfied. You don't have food yet, but you have the promise of it. And sometimes that's all you need to carry on. You glance at the empty table once more. It won't stay empty forever. But in ancient times, emptiness was always the starting point. Hunger first, food later, if you were lucky. The smoke thickens, curling into your nose until it clings to the back of your throat. You step outside, blinking against the late afternoon glare. And there it is, the heart of every ancient meal, the open fire. Stones are arranged in a rough circle, ashes spilling over the edges, a blackened pot suspended above like some tired old warrior dangling in place. Sparks leap into the air, floating upward before vanishing into the golden sky. You crouch closer, feeling the raw heat on your skin. There's no polite hum of an electric stovetop here. It's crackling wood, snapping twigs, and the occasional hiss when a drop of water strikes flame. Every sound reminds you how fragile this process is. If the fire dies, so does dinner. If it rages too wildly, the food burns, the pot cracks, and the night is ruined. Balance is everything. A woman stirs the pot with a stick that looks like it's seen better days. Steam bursts out, carrying scents of grain and herbs, simple but comforting. You realize how much smoke must have clung to ancient clothes, hair, even skin. You can picture families sitting around the fire, eyes watering, coughing lightly, and yet carrying on because the taste at the end was worth it. Cooking over fire isn't just about heat, it's about ritual. Every culture you can think of tied its identity to the way it used fire. Ancient Egyptians used clay ovens shaped like beehives. Persians slow-roasted meats underground. And the Chinese mastered the art of the wok. The fire wasn't just a tool, it was a stage. Meals became theater, smoke curling like curtains, flames flickering as the spotlight. You lean back, eyes half-lidded, as the sounds settle into rhythm. Crackle, stir, hiss, pause. Crackle, stir, hiss, pause. If you listen closely, it's almost like the ancient version of a lullaby. Not the kind sung to children, but the kind whispered to hungry adults, promising, "Wait just a little longer, food is coming." Still, nothing here is instant. Wood has to be collected. Fires have to be coaxed alive. Pots need tending for hours, sometimes days, before the meal is ready. You think of Roman garum, the famous fermented fish sauce, a staple across the empire. Making it wasn't just cooking. It was a commitment. Fish guts layered with salt, left to stew under the sun until the smell became so powerful that, according to one old quirk of history, some towns banned production inside city walls. Imagine a whole neighborhood reeking of rotting fish, but hey, dinner tasted good, so apparently that was worth it. Your stomach twists at the thought. Hunger sharpens, but appetite hesitates. Eating in the past wasn't always pleasant. It was smoky, smelly, and often questionable. And yet that was normal. People didn't complain about burnt edges or smoky flavor. They accepted it as part of life. You shift your gaze to the children hovering near the fire. They're not waiting for a full meal. They're waiting for scraps, a burnt crust, a ladle of thin broth, anything to quiet the growl in their bellies. Food wasn't fair. It never has been. The wealthy feasted while the poor scraped by on what smoke and flame could coax from scraps of grain. A thought lingers in your mind. How different it must have felt to sit around fire every night. Today, meals are background noise to shows, phones, and chatter. Back then, fire was the entertainment. Its glow was the television, its crackle the radio. The fire filled silence with sound and light, pulling people together, reminding them that while the world outside was dark and uncertain, here, in this small circle of flame, there was warmth. The woman at the fire pulls out the stick, taps it against the pot, and tastes what clings. She nods, just slightly, and sprinkles something from a pouch at her side. Maybe salt, maybe a herb, maybe crushed garlic if they're lucky. Suddenly the air sharpens with flavor, and you realize spices weren't just for taste. They were tiny miracles. A pinch could transform bland grain into something you could trick yourself into loving. No wonder trade routes grew around them. No wonder wars were fought over them. The pot bubbles louder, like it's arguing with itself, fighting between boiling over and calming down. The children inch closer, only to be waved back. Patience. Always patience. Ancient eating was a waiting game, and waiting hurt the most when your stomach was empty. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the smoke sting your eyelids, letting the heat press into your skin. You picture generations before you. Romans, Persians, Greeks, Egyptians, each one sitting just like this, waiting for the moment when fire gave way to food. The details changed, the pots, the grains, the herbs, but the essence remained the same. A circle of people, a fire in the center, and the shared hope that what bubbled in the pot would be enough. The woman stirs one last time, then pulls the pot off the flame with a cloth wrapped tight around her hand. The bubbling softens, steam swirling upward like a sigh of relief. For the first time all day, the air carries not just the smell of smoke, but the promise of a meal about to begin. You breathe in deep, and for a moment, you duck your head and step inside what passes for a kitchen. Though calling it that feels generous, the air here is thicker, heavier, pressed down with the weight of smoke that never really leaves. Your eyes adjust slowly, and what you see makes you grin. So this is where the magic, or maybe the chaos, happens. The walls are darkened, stained by years of soot, as if the very stones have been fed more smoke than food. Pots of clay line the shelves, some chipped, others barely hanging together with crude repairs. Wooden spoons, pestles, and knives rest nearby, their handles smoothed by endless hands. Nothing is shiny, nothing is new, but everything works, or at least it has to. You watch as a figure kneels over a stone slab, grinding grain into flour. The sound is steady, rhythmic, a scraping that burrows into your ears until it becomes background music. Each push forward and drag back sends a puff of powder into the air. You imagine the taste coarse, gritty, not at all like the refined flour you're used to. Bread made from this would be dense, chewy, and filling, but not exactly the fluffy clouds you buy in plastic bags today. Nearby, another person chops onions, their eyes watering, though it's hard to tell whether it's from the onion or from the smoke swirling around. The knife is dull by modern standards, more a wedge of sharpened stone or bronze than anything sleek. Every cut takes effort, every slice is a battle. You think about how many meals have started with this tedious work. Someone crying silently into the food, and suddenly, your kitchen at home, with its gadgets, timers, and blades sharp enough to shave with, feels like a palace. A pot on the ground holds something less appealing. Scraps of bone, fat, and strange bits of meat that don't belong anywhere else. It's going into the stew tonight, because waste is a luxury no one here can afford. You glance down at it, nose wrinkling, and wonder how many times in history people have swallowed things they'd rather not think about, just to quiet their hunger. The answer is almost always. And then there's the quirky detail that makes you smirk. In some ancient kitchens, cats weren't just tolerated, they were encouraged, because where there's food, there are pests. Cats kept the rodents away, even if occasionally they got bold and stole a bit themselves. You imagine a whiskered thief sneaking in, tail high, paw swiping a piece of fish right off the table while the cook turned their back. The kitchen wasn't just a place for food. It was a battlefield. And everyone, humans, animals, even insects, wanted a share. A hand reaches for a bundle of herbs hanging overhead, dried and brittle. They crumble easily, releasing a faint aroma of something sharp and earthy. Herbs were the secret weapon of ancient kitchens, both for taste and survival. Some added flavor. Others disguised the taste of meat that had gone a little too far past fresh. And still others were believed to heal, oregano for the stomach, garlic for strength, mint for breath. Scholars still argue whether people genuinely trusted these plants as medicine or just hoped they worked. But either way, meals became little rituals of healing. You step back to avoid the sudden splash of liquid as someone pours water into the pot. It hisses, bubbles, then settles into a steady simmer. The sound echoes against the walls, filling the cramped space with a kind of music. For a moment, you close your eyes and let the rhythm of the kitchen surround you. The scrape of stone, the chop of knife, the hiss of water, the crackle of fire. It's chaotic and hypnotic, noisy but strangely soothing. But kitchens weren't always small, smoky rooms. In some cultures, they were outdoors, under the sky, built that way to keep smoke from choking people inside. Imagine a wide courtyard, pots bubbling on open flames, servants rushing around with trays, dogs lurking underfoot for scraps. Meals weren't just cooked, they were orchestrated. The kitchen became a stage, every cook a performer, every dish a scene waiting to be unveiled. Your eyes catch a clay jug in the corner, lid half open. The smell that wafts out is questionable. Fermented grains? Old beer? Maybe both? Someone lifts it carefully, pours a thick stream into another pot, and stirs. You realize that food and drink often blurred together in these spaces. Broths became both meal and hydration. Fermented brews were safer than water in some places, so kitchens doubled as makeshift breweries. The line between chef and brewer was thin, and sometimes, hilariously, the drink was safer than the stew. The longer you linger, the more you notice details. Children darting in and out with baskets. An elder in the corner muttering instructions no one seems to follow. A stack of bread cooling on a mat, guarded fiercely by a boy who looks like he'd bite anyone who came too close. Kitchens were family spaces, messy and loud, far from the quiet, polished idea of cooking you see in glossy cookbooks. You breathe deep, trying to imagine what it would be like to live in this room, to spend hours every day chopping, grinding, stirring, and breathing in smoke. It's tiring just to watch, and yet you sense something oddly grounding about it. Food wasn't delivered, wasn't frozen, wasn't ordered from a glowing screen. It was fought for, prepared slowly, earned with sweat and ash. And as much as your modern self wants to complain about the smell, the mess, and the questionable hygiene, you also realize this was survival. Without rooms like this, without endless smoke-stained walls and aching arms grinding grain, no civilization would have made it far. Kitchens like this were the engines of history. You take one last look around. The pot is bubbling steadily now, sending curls of steam upward. The smell, though strange, is oddly inviting. You can almost picture sitting down later, a rough bowl in your hands, eating something that might not taste good by modern standards, but would taste like life itself, if you were hungry enough. And with that thought, you step back out into the fading light. The kitchen's chaos lingering in your ears like a fading drumbeat. You step away from the smoky kitchen and find yourself staring at something far humbler, far older, and far more important than any fancy banquet could ever be: bread. A few flat loaves rest on a cloth, rough-edged, browned unevenly, and you realize you're looking at the true foundation of survival. Forget feasts, forget delicacies. Without bread, entire civilizations would have collapsed. You pick one up. It's heavier than you expect, dense, almost like a brick. The surface is dusted with flour, the bottom charred where it kissed hot stone. When you break it open, it doesn't crumble into soft fluff. It tears, chewy and tough, with a smell that's equal parts comforting and earthy. You chew carefully, and though your jaw complains, your stomach hums in approval. This isn't dessert. This is fuel. Bread was life. Egyptians practically worshipped it, stuffing tombs with loaves so the dead wouldn't go hungry in the afterlife. Romans handed it out during public games, bread and circuses. They called it because as long as the people were fed, the politicians could keep their power. Even the poorest farmer clung to bread as a daily guarantee, a small reassurance against the gnawing chaos of hunger. You picture a line of people, each clutching their ration, tearing it into chunks to dip into thin stew. No one asks what's in the stew, probably vegetables, maybe scraps of meat, maybe just hot water with herbs. But with bread, it fills the belly, stretches the meal, makes the difference between going to bed hungry and sleeping in relative comfort. And here's a quirky twist you didn't expect. Some bread wasn't even for eating. Archaeologists have found loaves hardened into strange shapes, left as offerings to gods. Others were made so poorly they still carry the fingerprints of the baker, smudged into the crust forever. Imagine pulling your art project bread out of the oven, realizing it's more stone than food, and deciding, the gods can have this one. You bite again, trying to imagine a life where every meal revolves around bread. Breakfast, bread dipped in oil. Lunch, bread with dried fish. Dinner, bread with stew. If you were lucky, maybe a drizzle of honey or some olives on the side. Scholars still argue whether bread was truly loved for its taste or simply endured for its necessity. But either way, it anchored life. Your mind drifts to the variety. Not all bread was equal. The rich could afford whiter, softer loaves, sifted carefully to remove the bran. The poor got the darker, heavier stuff, more filling but far harder to chew. Sometimes grains of sand ended up mixed in with flour, and you wince at the thought of grinding your teeth down with every bite. Imagine dental visits back then. Actually, no, don't imagine. Pain was just part of dinner. Still, there's a comfort to bread. Its smell, its warmth, the way it brings people together. You picture a family sitting on woven mats, breaking loaves with their hands, passing chunks around, dipping them into shared bowls. No cutlery, no plates, no fuss. Just bread and togetherness. Somehow, despite the grit, the uneven texture, the burned bottoms, it worked. You can't help but smirk at the idea that, thousands of years from now, someone might look at your plastic-wrapped supermarket loaf and think, wow, they had it easy but missed the soul. Because as rough as ancient bread was, it carried a certain presence. It wasn't a side dish, it wasn't an afterthought, it was the meal. And of course, bread wasn't just food. It was politics. Control the grain supply, and you controlled the people. Rome literally had grain ships sailing in from Egypt to feed the city. And whenever those ships were delayed, the people rioted. Bread riots weren't rare. They were history on repeat. Hunger wasn't patient, and bread shortages toppled more than one ruler. The loaf in your hands feels heavier now, not just with weight, but with meaning. This isn't just baked grain. It's survival, power, rebellion, and comfort, all packed into one chewy package. You take another bite, slower this time, and notice the lingering aftertaste of smoke. It's not unpleasant, just present, like the ghost of the fire clings to the food. You wonder how many people across centuries chewed the same taste, their thoughts drifting not to flavor but to fullness. Your stomach settles, the bread doing its job, and you feel a drowsy heaviness tug at your eyelids. Bread doesn't excite, it grounds. It pulls you back to earth, pins you in place with the weight of simple satisfaction. And as you sit there, crumbs falling into your lap, you realize this was the heartbeat of ancient eating. Not luxury, not spectacle, but bread, always bread. You glance down at the remaining piece in your hand, torn and rough, and smile. You might not love the chew, but you respect it. Because without loaves like this, you wouldn't even be here to complain. You wipe the crumbs from your hands, and soon your attention drifts to something even more critical than food itself, what you drink with it. You think water should be the easiest choice, right? Clear, fresh, harmless. But in ancient times, water was as much a gamble as it was a blessing. One sip could refresh you or end you. You peer into a clay jug sitting by the fire. Its surface is rough, its rim chipped, and the liquid inside glints faintly in the light. Is it water? Maybe. Safe? Definitely questionable. Wells were shallow. Rivers teemed with life, both the kind you want and the kind you don't. Parasites, bacteria, runoff from who knows what upstream. Every sip carried a whisper of danger. No wonder entire civilizations leaned on alternatives. Wine, for example, was everywhere. The Greeks poured it at every gathering, diluted with water so strong, drink wouldn't turn into instant chaos. The Romans went even further, spicing it, mixing it with honey, even warming it for winter nights. You take a sip in your mind, and it burns sweet and sharp. A little like drinking history itself. The alcohol killed some germs at least, which made it safer than raw water. Well, safer, depending on how many cups you decided to down. And then there was beer. Grain turned into frothy, slightly sour liquid gold. Ancient Egyptians drank it daily, thick and filling, sometimes with bits floating in it like a meal in itself. Workers on the pyramids were paid partly in beer, each sip fueling the endless labor of stacking stones into the sky. Imagine that, your paycheck arriving not as coins but as mugs. Part hydration, part calories, part bribe. You chuckle at the thought. Beer is both currency and comfort. Though the taste might make modern craft brewers cry, it was the backbone of daily life. A little sour, a little gritty, but dependable, and safer than rolling the dice with river water. Not every drink was noble, though. Fermented goat's milk, for instance, appeared in some regions. Tangy, pungent, probably an acquired taste. You picture yourself holding the bowl, nose twitching, trying to smile politely as someone offers it with pride. Drink up, honored guest. And you do, because refusing might insult them. Scholars still argue whether people genuinely liked these drinks or simply tolerated them out of necessity. After all, when your options are wine with floaty herbs or water that might kill you, a preference becomes survival strategy. You start to see why entire rituals formed around drinking, because it wasn't just about hydration. It was about making dangerous choices feel safer, even celebratory. Of course, drinks could also reveal your place in society. The wealthy sipped fine wines imported from across the seas, flavors layered like secrets. The poor stuck to thin beer or questionable water. At a banquet, your cup wasn't just your drink, it was your status symbol. A clay mug versus a silver goblet told the whole story before you even opened your mouth. You lift the jug again in your imagination, sniff cautiously, and wonder how many times someone drank knowing it might end badly. Dysentery wasn't just a traveler's curse, it was a daily risk. A sip too careless, a well dug too shallow, and you'd spend your night far from the comfort of a bed. Suddenly that diluted wine doesn't sound so bad. And there's the odd detail that sticks. Some people believed wine could carry messages from the gods. Drunkenness wasn't always shameful. It was sometimes considered divine. You picture a group swaying together, cups sloshing, laughing too loudly, claiming visions and prophecies between hiccups. Religion, medicine, entertainment, all swirling in a single clay cup. The longer you sit, the more you realize how central drinks were to ancient meals. They weren't just an accessory. They shaped the whole experience. The laughter at a feast, the energy of a worker, the haze of a festival, all powered by what sloshed in those jugs. You tilt your imaginary cup back, take one last sip, and let the warmth, or is it dizziness, spread through you. Your lips feel dry, your throat warm, your stomach both soothed and unsettled. That's the gamble of ancient drinking. It could refresh you, or it could betray you. But either way, you raised your cup, because thirst was always louder than fear. You set the jug down gently, listening to the faint gurgle inside, and for a moment, you think you hear the echo of countless voices raising their cups before you. Toasts shouted across time, to health, to gods, to survival. And you realize, whether it was wine, beer, milk, or just plain water, drinking was never simple. It was always a risk, always a ritual. Always a reminder that life in ancient times could never be taken for granted. Your lips are still tingling from that questionable sip, and before you can even decide if it was wine, beer, or just water with ambition, a new scent drifts your way, sharp, exotic, almost intoxicating. Spices, tiny flakes of dried plants, seeds, and roots, carried from lands so far away they might as well be another world. You glance at the small pouch in the cook's hand, and suddenly the meal in front of you transforms. What was once plain stew becomes aromatic, layered, exciting. This, you realize, is the magic of the ancient spice trade, the moment when food turned from survival into experience. The roots themselves were dangerous. Caravans crawled across deserts, camels swaying under loads of pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and saffron. Ships braved storms, carrying nutmeg and ginger through waters filled with pirates. Every pinch of spice in the pot represented miles of hardship, months of waiting, and probably a few curses muttered by merchants along the way, and people were willing to pay. You'd laugh if you knew how much. Spices were sometimes worth more than gold. Black pepper, the kind you casually twist onto your fries today, was once a status symbol, flaunted like jewelry. To sprinkle it on your bread was to announce, "Yes, I'm absurdly wealthy, and I want you to know it." You lean closer to the pot, eyes closing as the steam hits you. Cinnamon, maybe, or cumin. The line blurs, but the effect is the same. A simple broth now feels like a banquet. It makes sense why people fought wars, signed treaties, and even launched whole empires just to control these flavors. Here's a quirky little fact that makes you smirk. In medieval Europe, some cooks sprinkled so many spices into their dishes that the food itself disappeared under layers of pepper and cloves. Was it to show off wealth? Probably. Was it also to disguise meat that had been sitting a little too long in the sun? Almost certainly. A double win, luxury and camouflage. You can't help but think about the irony. People risked their lives hauling spices across continents, while on the other end, someone's dinner guest was politely chewing through mystery meat, just made bearable by all that expensive pepper. Imagine risking pirate attacks in desert, bandits just so someone could stomach last week's questionable chicken. But scholars still argue whether the demand for spices was purely about flavor or if it carried deeper meanings, medicine, ritual, even mystical power. Nutmeg was thought to chase away plague. Saffron was said to boost mood, and maybe even other things people whispered about after too much wine. Spices weren't just culinary, they were emotional, spiritual, and political all at once. The cook pinches a little more into the bubbling pot, and the smell thickens, weaving through the smoky air until you feel almost dizzy. It's not just food anymore. It's atmosphere, memory, identity. You realize that spices did more than transform meals. They transformed cultures. A stew with cumin tasted different from one without. And over generations, those flavors defined regions. You imagine yourself on a spice road caravan, trudging across sand, lips cracked, eyes squinting against the sun. Each bag on the camel beside you is worth fortunes, but also risk. One storm, one raid, one misstep, and everything is lost. Yet the merchants kept going because demand never stopped. Somewhere far away, a wealthy diner was waiting for that one pinch of saffron to make their soup glow golden. And here you are, inhaling it centuries later, drifting towards sleep as the steam wraps around you like a weighted blanket. The taste lingers on your tongue, even though you haven't swallowed a bite. It's funny. Spices were once the fuel for greed, conquest, and exploration. And now, they're the quiet background notes to your drowsy imagination. Your stomach growls softly and you smile. You don't need much, just the suggestion of warmth, the hint of spice to feel comforted. Somewhere deep inside, your body knows what ancient people knew. Food isn't just for survival. It's for pleasure, connection, even dreams. You lean back, eyelids heavier, the last curl of spice-scented steam rising past your nose, and think, no matter how dangerous the journey, humans have always gone a little crazy for flavor. And honestly, you can't blame them. The spices still tingle in your nose when the meal shifts, and suddenly you're staring at a platter that would make even the bravest diner pause. Meat, though not the kind you're expecting. No juicy burgers, no neatly wrapped steaks, no nuggets shaped like stars. Instead, the table offers pigeons, goats, rabbits, even the occasional camel. You lean in cautiously, eyeing a roasted bird no bigger than your hand. The skin glistens, pulled tight over tiny bones. Wings folded as if it might fly off your plate at any second. Someone plucks it apart without hesitation. Teeth sinking in, grease dripping down their chin. It hits you. Nothing was wasted in ancient times. If it walked, flew, or crawled, Someone somewhere had already figured out how to roast it. Odd meats weren't odd to them, they were Tuesday. Romans enjoyed flamingo tongues, prized for their texture. In parts of the Middle East, camel meat was a staple, sometimes dried into strips to last longer in desert heat. Ancient Chinese banquets offered everything from dogs to exotic deer, each dish carrying meaning, luck, or just bragging rights. You wrinkle your nose imagining the flavors. Some must have been delicious. Goat stews simmered with herbs, rabbit roasted over slow fire. Others, probably less so. Yet hunger doesn't leave room for pickiness. When food is survival, even the strangest cut can become delicacy. And here's a quirky little detail to chew on. The ancient Romans sometimes stuffed dormice. Yes, dormice, those tiny rodents, fattened them up, roasted them, and served them to guests as appetizers. Imagine sitting at a dinner party, smiling politely as someone says, "Try the stuffed mouse, it's divine." Your modern brain screams, nope. But to them, it was luxury. You picture the poor, too. For them, odd meats weren't exotic. They were necessity. Bones boiled for broth, organs fried into chewy meals, skins turned into jerky. Waste nothing. That was the law. Even the parts we'd toss today found their way into pots. A sheep's stomach might become a casing for grains. A cow's hooves boiled into jelly-like glue that doubled as food. Desperation makes chefs of everyone. Scholars still argue whether these odd meats were celebrated for taste or simply endured. Was flamingo tongue really delicious? Or was it just expensive and therefore impressive? Was camel meat savored or just practical for nomadic life? The debate lingers, but one thing is clear. Meat, however strange, carried weight. It was protein, it was status, it was survival. You lean closer to the platter, steam curling upward. The smell is gamey, rich, unfamiliar. You hesitate, then imagine taking a bite. The meat is tougher than you expect, chewy, earthy, almost wild in flavor. Not unpleasant, just different. And with each chew you realize how soft modern diets have become. Ancient meals asked more of you. Stronger jaws, stronger stomachs, fewer complaints. There's something grounding about it, though. To eat what's available, to share it with your group, to accept that food is never perfect. It makes you part of the cycle. You aren't just a diner. You're a survivor. You glance around at the people tearing meat apart with bare hands, grease shining on their fingers, laughter booming between bites. Table manners don't matter much when the goal is filling bellies. The scene is messy, primal, but oddly comforting. In their world, eating wasn't about neatness, it was about presence. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. For every flamingo tongue and stuffed mouse, there were also ordinary goats. Chickens and fish roasted with care, feeding families who didn't care about novelty. Odd meats only seem odd when you're used to choice. Back then, choice didn't exist. What was in front of you was what you ate. End of story. You take another imaginary bite of that roasted bird, the flavor lingering on your tongue. It's chewy, smoky, not something you'd crave, but something that grounds you, roots you in a time when food wasn't guaranteed, when nothing edible went to waste. Your stomach shifts, a mix of curiosity and queasiness, and you laugh softly. Maybe you wouldn't survive ancient dining after all. Or maybe you'd surprise yourself, just like they did. Every single day, the taste of roasted pigeon still lingers when the scene around you transforms into something louder, brighter, and far less private. The dinner table vanishes, and suddenly you're not just eating, you're attending. The feast stretches before you like a carnival, long benches, overflowing platters, goblets clinking together, people laughing with mouths full. Banquets in the ancient world weren't quiet affairs. They were declarations. If you had wealth, you showed it by feeding more mouths than necessary. The bigger the spread, the louder the music. The longer the night, the greater your reputation. You walk through the space slowly, weaving between low tables, catching the sharp scents of wine, roasted meats, honey cakes stacked like towers. You hear music, flutes, lyres, hand drums filling the air. It's not background ambiance. It's part of the feast itself, woven into the rhythm of conversation. In ancient Rome, performers were hired not just to play music, but to crack jokes, recite poetry, even stage little dramas while guests stuffed themselves. If you didn't laugh at least once, the host had failed. The Greeks had their symposia, drinking parties, that were equal parts philosophy and chaos. Imagine sipping sweet wine from a shallow cup, while someone across the room starts debating the meaning of courage, and the next guy interrupts to sing a bawdy song about goats. That was Tuesday night for them. Odd detail here. Sometimes guests played drinking games with actual wine dregs, flicking the sticky remains at targets across the room. Miss the bowl, and you'd splatter your neighbor's cloak. Sophisticated? Not really. Entertaining? Definitely. You notice the hierarchy at play too. Not everyone is reclining on cushions with a platter of meats. The wealthiest guests sprawl at the center, closer to performers, while lesser attendees sit farther back, their plates a little emptier, their cups a little thinner. Servants dart through the crowd, carrying jugs, scraping scraps, trying not to trip on the rushes strewn across the floor. The air is thick, meat smoke, spiced wine, sweat, perfume. It's intoxicating, dizzying, overwhelming. You press forward and realize something subtle. These feasts aren't just about food, they're about display. To host is to prove power. To eat is to belong. Mainstream fact slips in here. Historians note that in Mesopotamia, palace banquets were political tools. Kings staged massive meals, feeding hundreds at once, to demonstrate not only wealth but divine favor. To eat the king's bread was to be under his rule. It wasn't dinner, it was propaganda served on silver platters. Your eyes catch something quirky at one corner. A group of guests are leaning over a table, not eating, but sniffing little bags of herbs. Coriander, mint, fennel, used to freshen breath or mask the sour reek of wine. Ancient mouthwash right there at the party. You smile, imagining someone pausing mid-feast to say, "Hold on, let me freshen up before I recite my poem." Scholars still argue whether these feasts were genuinely about joy, or if they were power plays disguised as entertainment. Did people attend because they loved the food and music, or because not showing up might insult a host who held political sway? The debate lingers like the aftertaste of too strong wine. You drift toward the musicians, the rhythm soft and insistent. Fingers pluck strings, voices chant in harmony. A flute pierces the air with sharp sweetness. You feel it pulling you along, tugging you deeper into the night. Conversation swells around you, stories of trade routes, arguments about crops, whispers about someone's scandalous affair. And then you notice the exhaustion, servants sagging at the edges, musicians playing the same notes for hours, even guests slumping against each other as the endless courses keep coming. A banquet is a performance, and not just for the host. It's a test of stamina for everyone involved. You imagine yourself at one of these feasts, reclining on cushions, cup in hand. At first, it feels like indulgence. By the 10th refill, the 4th platter, the 50th song, you realize it's also endurance. Can you keep eating, drinking, smiling? Can you stay until the host decides it's time to end? And maybe that's the secret. Feasts weren't about enjoying food, they were about proving you could handle it. Like surviving a marathon, but instead of running, you're consuming. And tomorrow, you'd brag about how long you lasted. What strange dish you tried? What witty remark you delivered? As you drift back from the noise, you feel the pulse of it settle into you. These banquets were loud, messy, excessive, but they were the heartbeat of community too. Shared laughter, shared food, shared songs. In their chaos, they stitched people together, one bite and one note at a time. Your ears still ring with the music as the scene fades, leaving only the echo of goblets clinking and voices rising. You realize you've just walked through not a dinner, but a declaration of life itself. The echoes of laughter and clinking goblets dissolve, and the space around you grows quieter, more intimate. The grand feast disappears, leaving behind the hush of an ordinary meal. No flamingo tongues, no lyres strumming in the background, just bread, broth, and the closeness of family. You sit cross-legged on a dirt floor, knees brushing against others. A clay bowl is placed before you, steaming with something simple. Lentils, onions, maybe a scrap of meat if you're lucky. No silver forks, no plates piled high, just one vessel shared by many hands. You tear a piece of coarse bread, dipping it into the broth, and suddenly you understand how most people truly ate. Quietly, sparingly, gratefully. The rhythm of ancient life wasn't dominated by banquets. It was shaped by these humble meals. Farmers came in from fields with aching backs. Children clutched their bellies against hunger. Mothers stretched a single chicken to feed a household of 10. Eating was less about indulgence, more about survival. Mainstream fact: in ancient Egypt, workers who built the pyramids weren't fed lavish feasts. They ate daily rations of bread, onions and beer, simple, filling, and enough to keep them going through back-breaking labor. No gold plates, no sweet cakes, just fuel for the body. You dip the bread again, the soup salty, thin but warm. It isn't exciting, yet there's comfort in its predictability. For most people, food wasn't meant to thrill, it was meant to appear, at least once a day, on the table. And here comes a quirky. Detail: archaeologists have found fossilized human droppings, yes, ancient poop, that reveal what everyday diets looked like. Seeds, husks, bits of grain, sometimes even tiny fish bones. Imagine future scholars staring at what you flushed this morning and debating what it says about your lifestyle. Not glamorous, but it's science. You watch the family around you, the way they lean into each other, passing bowls, sharing bites. Conversation is quiet, practical. Weather, crops, chores. Children slurp noisily, earning scolds. Someone coughs into their sleeve. The air is heavy with the smell of earth, smoke, and boiled onions. And it hits you, while rulers threw parties to prove power. The real backbone of society was this: ordinary people eating ordinary food, keeping themselves alive for another day of work. Scholars still argue whether these small meals built stronger communities than the grand feasts did. Was intimacy more binding than spectacle? Did families who shared bread daily hold deeper ties than nobles, who reclined once a month on cushions? The debate lingers, quiet but persistent, like the smoke curling from the clay pot. You take another bite of the bread. It's dense, chewy, bits of husk catching in your teeth. Not unpleasant, but not indulgent. You chew slowly, imagining this as your diet every single day. No sugar rush, no variety, no colorful packaging promising joy. Just sustenance, stripped to its bare bones. And yet there's dignity in it. These meals were honest. Nothing hidden, nothing wasted. What you see is what you get. You feel the weight of centuries pressing into this bowl of lentils. A reminder that survival is often quiet, repetitive, and unspectacular. The flicker of a small oil lamp casts long shadows on the mud brick walls. Someone hums a tune softly, almost without realizing it. A baby whimpers, soothed quickly with a corner of bread dipped in broth. You're part of something small but unshakable. As the bowl empties, you realize you're not hungry anymore. Not because the meal was abundant, but because it filled a need in the simplest way possible. And maybe that's what made these modest meals powerful. They asked nothing more than to be enough. The noise of banquets might have carried through the streets, but this quiet meal? This was the heartbeat of history. Small, steady, often overlooked, but always there. The scene softens as you lean back against the wall, belly warm, eyelids heavy. Luxury might sparkle, but simplicity lingers longer. And tonight, you've tasted the strength of ordinary life. The warmth of lentils and bread still sits, heavy in your stomach. When the world around you shifts again, the quiet of a mud brick home fades, replaced by the clatter of hooves, the creak of wheels, and the groans of tired travelers. You're no longer sitting at a hearth, you're on the road. And suddenly the most pressing question isn't luxury or simplicity. It's, what do you eat when you're nowhere near a kitchen? Traveling in ancient times meant gambling with your stomach. You couldn't swing by a drive-thru. And you definitely couldn't grab a bag of chips at a gas station. You carried what you could, begged when you had to, and prayed the next village had something more than stale bread. You reach into a sack slung over your shoulder and pull out the traveler's staple, hard bread. It's so tough you could probably use it as a weapon. You gnaw on it anyway, jaw aching, crumbs catching in your throat. To wash it down, you've got watered wine or maybe a skin of sour ale, because clean water isn't guaranteed. Mainstream fact: Roman soldiers on the march survived on a ration called buccellatum, a rock-hard biscuit that could last for months. Durable, yes. Delicious? Absolutely not. Soldiers often joked they'd rather fight barbarians than their own dinner. You keep walking, the road dusty underfoot, sun pressing down. Hunger bites quickly when you're burning energy all day. Your next stop? A roadside inn if you're lucky. But inn is a generous word. Imagine a smoky room crammed with strangers. Straw pallets and a pot of thin stew bubbling in the corner. You pay your coin, you eat what you're given, and you don't ask questions about where the meat came from. And here's a quirky detail: travelers sometimes relied on food offerings left at temples. Picture yourself sneaking into a shrine, eyeing the fruit or bread meant for the gods, and thinking, oh well, they won't miss one loaf, right? Pilfering from a deity wasn't exactly safe, but hunger makes rebels out of everyone. The road continues, winding through forests, deserts, mountains. Each environment dictates what's possible. In arid lands, dried dates and figs keep you alive. Their sugar's a burst of energy. Near rivers, smoked fish fills your pack, its salty tang clinging to your fingers. In forests, you might forage berries if you can tell which ones won't kill you. That's a big if. You chew another bite of bread, stale but filling, and glance at the horizon. The monotony of travel breaks only when you share a meal with strangers. Around a campfire, you pass a flask, trade stories, maybe tear a loaf in half for someone else. Food becomes currency, not just for your stomach, but for trust. Scholars still argue whether ancient travel was more dangerous because of food scarcity or bandits. Was starvation the bigger risk, or was it the knife at your throat while you chewed? Either way, eating on the move was never just about calories. It was survival strategy. Your feet ache. The road stretches endlessly. You remember the banquets with their stuffed dormice in the homes, with their lentil stews, and you realize traveling strips it all away. No status, no luxury, not even comfort. Just you, the road, and whatever you can cram into your pack. And maybe, strangely, there's freedom in that. Meals on the road are humble, forgettable, sometimes downright miserable, but they're also yours. No lord to impress, no family to share with, no hierarchy dictating who sits where. Just you, your hunger, and the stubborn determination to keep walking. The campfire crackles as night settles. You chew one last mouthful of dry bread, sip from your wineskin, and lie back against your pack. The stars overhead burn cold and distant, but your stomach is steady, if not satisfied. Tomorrow you'll rise and do it again. Travel never promised comfort, it promised movement. And your food, however plain, is proof you're still going. The crunch of stale bread fades as the road gives way to something rougher, darker. You feel the shift instantly. No bustling inns, no communal fires, just shadows pressing in from every direction. Traveling in ancient times didn't just test your legs, it tested your nerves. Because out here, the danger wasn't always hunger. Sometimes it had sharp teeth, or worse, a dagger in the dark. You walk slowly, the path uneven beneath your feet. Somewhere in the trees, a wolf howls. You clutch the strap of your pack a little tighter, glancing at the silhouettes around you. Not all travelers are friends. Bandits lurked on these roads like toll booths with knives, waiting for someone desperate enough, or unlucky enough, to pass alone. Food, oddly enough, could be both salvation and bait. Carry too much and you attract thieves. Carry too little and you risk starving before reaching the next town. Every bite you eat is a calculation, enough to stay strong, but not so much you can't stretch it further. Mainstream fact, the Silk Road, stretching from China to the Mediterranean, wasn't just a highway for silk and spices. It was also notorious for bandit raids. Caravans often traveled with guards, not because the desert was harsh, though it was, but because other humans were harsher. You pull your cloak tighter, imagining the whispers of travelers beside you. Keep the fire small or they'll see it. Don't show the gold. Eat quickly. Survival, once again, dictates not only what you eat, but how you eat it. Meals on dangerous roads were fast, quiet, and sometimes eaten cold, because even the smell of cooking could give you away. And here's a quirky detail. Some ancient travelers carried garlic, not just as food, but as protection. People believed its pungent smell kept away evil spirits. Picture yourself clutching a bulb of garlic like a holy charm, chewing it raw, hoping the bandits, or maybe the spirits, decide you're not worth the trouble. The night deepens. The road is empty except for the echo of your footsteps. You remember the warmth of family stews, the chaos of banquets, the monotony of bread on the march. Out here, none of that matters. Food becomes something smaller, just enough to keep your legs moving, your eyes sharp, your mind focused on reaching morning. Scholars still argue whether fear of bandits exaggerated the reality of ancient travel, or if records understate it. Were roads genuinely that dangerous? Or do stories just magnify the terror for dramatic flair? Either way, the anxiety is real. Even in your imagination, you can feel it prickling at your skin. Your stomach growls, but you hesitate. Do you risk lighting a fire, roasting something you've carried, filling the night air with the scent of food? Or do you gnaw the bread in silence, teeth aching, eyes darting into the dark? You choose the latter, chewing quietly, each crunch louder in your ears than the howl of wolves. And yet, even in danger, there's strange camaraderie. A stranger beside you tears his bread in half, offering it silently. You accept, nodding thanks. In that small exchange, the road feels less lonely. Hunger might divide people, but sometimes it forges bonds too. Fragile but real. The hours crawl by. You eat little, drink less, conserving everything for the uncertain days ahead. Each bite is both victory and reminder. Food isn't guaranteed. Safety isn't guaranteed, nothing is guaranteed. The road teaches humility, stripping life down to its barest truth. At last, dawn creeps over the horizon. The shadows thin, the world softens. You survive the night with nothing but a crust of bread, a gulp of sour wine, and sheer stubbornness. And somehow that feels like more of an achievement than any banquet. Because sometimes the hardest meals are the ones that don't even taste good, but keep you alive long enough to see another sunrise. The fear of wolves and bandits fades with the morning light, replaced by the soft hum of civilization. You crest a hill and suddenly, the smell hits you before the sight does. Smoke, spices, roasting meat, the faint sour tang of fermenting wine. Below lies a city, its walls sun-bleached, its streets buzzing, its markets alive with chaos. And here food transforms again. You step through the gates and the noise slams into you, shouts in a dozen tongues. Animals bleating, coins clinking, laughter bargaining. The market stretches like a labyrinth, stalls stacked with figs and dates, baskets spilling over with olives, heaps of grain gleaming like sand dunes. You've survived bread and broth. But now temptation pulls you in every direction. Vendors wave skewers of sizzling meat under your nose, the fat dripping onto hot coals. Children dart between stalls, sticky with honey, clutching candied nuts wrapped in paper. The air is dizzying, half perfume, half sweat, half raw excitement. You're not just eating here. You're performing the ritual of commerce, tasting the world in bites. Mainstream fact, Roman markets, known as Macella, sold everything from fish to exotic spices. Archaeologists have uncovered fish bones from faraway seas, proving that even in ancient times, globalization was alive and well on your dinner plate. You wander deeper where things get stranger. A man sells fermented fish paste, the smell so sharp you nearly gag. A woman offers dyed cakes shaped like animals, their colors unnaturally bright. Another stall pushes dried locusts, crunchy protein snacks long before gym bros discovered them. And here's a quirky detail. In some ancient marketplaces, bakers stamped loaves of bread with little symbols so people could identify which bakery made them. Imagine buying a loaf branded like sneakers, flexing your bread like it's designer fashion. You stop at a stall selling spices. Tiny jars glimmer with saffron, cinnamon, pepper, treasures carried across deserts and seas. They cost more than most people's yearly wages. You sprinkle a pinch of pepper on your tongue, and it burns, hot and strange, like tasting wealth itself. Markets weren't just about food, they were theater. To shop was to mingle, to gossip, to see and be seen. You hear snatches of arguments over prices, rumors about foreign ships, whispers of scandal. Every purchase carries weight. A loaf means survival. A fig means indulgence. A jar of pepper means status. Scholars still argue whether ancient markets were truly accessible to everyone, or if they catered mostly to the wealthy. Did common people really buy saffron, or did they just gawk at it? Were markets democratic hubs, or carefully controlled showcases for power? The truth, as always, lingers somewhere between the shouting vendors and the silent stares of the hungry. You pause to eat. A fig bursts in your mouth, syrupy sweet, sticky on your fingers. You chase it with a sip of watered wine, then bite into bread that's softer than anything you had on the road. Around you, people eat as they walk, as they haggle, as they live. Food isn't a meal here, it's motion, fuel in the current of the city. A boy tugs at your sleeve, offering a handful of nuts for a coin. You hand it over, crunching on almonds dusted with salt. The flavor simple yet addictive. For a moment, you're just another face in the crowd, swept up in the rhythm of ancient commerce. And maybe that's the beauty of markets. They blur the lines between rich and poor, native and foreign, survival and luxury. Everyone eats, even if what they eat looks wildly different. Everyone smells the same roasting meat, feels the same hunger tug, hears the same bargaining calls. You lick honey from your fingers, pockets a little lighter, stomach a little fuller. The city around you hums with life, and you realize food isn't just sustenance. Here, it's the glue holding the chaos together. As you leave the market behind, the flavors still cling to your lips. Out there on the road, meals were about survival. But here in the city, food becomes something else entirely, a performance, a spectacle, a taste of belonging. The clamor of the market lingers as you wander deeper into the city, but instead of stalls and shouting vendors, you find yourself drifting toward quiet courtyards and shaded gardens, where the wealthy dine in ways far removed from bread and figs. Here, food becomes art, plated, curated, and meant to impress far beyond the stomach. You slip through a doorway and suddenly, you're inside the villa of someone important. Marble floors gleam, mosaics sparkle, and a long table stretches under soft lamplight. Servants glide in and out, balancing silver trays, pouring wine with steady hands. The guests recline on cushioned couches, draped in fine fabrics, speaking slowly, as though every word deserves applause. This isn't eating, it's theater. Platters arrive not just with food, but with stories. Fish arranged to look as though they're still swimming. Pastries dyed unnatural shades to shock the eye. Platters sculpted into animals, towers of sweets that threaten to topple at any moment. You lean closer, half expecting the peacock centerpiece to ruffle its feathers and strut across the table. Mainstream fact: wealthy Romans sometimes staged culinary illusions. One banquet famously featured a roast pig that, when cut open, spilled out sausages and smaller roasted birds, a kind of ancient piñata, except greasier. You watch a guest take a bite of something that looks like bread but tastes like meat, their expression torn between awe and confusion. That was the point. Food wasn't just nourishment, it was spectacle, a game of surprise and delight designed to remind everyone just how rich the host really was. And here's a quirky detail. Some wealthy diners employed a vomitorium, not the way modern myths suggest, as a special room for throwing up mid-feast, but as an architectural feature, a passageway in amphitheaters for crowd flow. Still, the myth persists, probably because it fits the image of guests eating themselves sick on endless dishes. The air is thick with perfume, roasted meats, honeyed wine, and something more subtle: competition. Every dish is a statement, every bite a performance. The host isn't just feeding you, they're showing you power, wealth, and creativity, all wrapped in pastry dough. Scholars still argue whether these extravagant displays were common or exaggerated in surviving records. Were most elite dinners this theatrical, or are we remembering only the most outrageous examples? Maybe the truth is less glamorous: a little bread, a little cheese, and an occasional peacock for special bragging rights. You sip a goblet of wine, its sweetness cloying, almost syrupy. Someone nearby laughs too loudly at a mediocre joke. Another picks delicately at their plate, as though actually eating would ruin the art. The servants move with silent efficiency, invisible yet essential. You can't help but wonder, do they sneak bites in the kitchen, tasting the peacock that the guests barely touch? For all its spectacle, there's a strange hollowness here. The market outside felt alive, messy, noisy, sticky with honey. This villa feels staged, rehearsed, each bite rehearsed applause. And yet, there's something mesmerizing in the display. A reminder that food has always been more than just survival. It's also a mirror, reflecting power back at those who wield it. You push the last bite around your plate, half tasting, half wondering. Did the guests here actually enjoy these meals, or were they too busy pretending? Were they savoring, or just surviving a different kind of hunger? The hunger for status? The night stretches on, courses piling one after another until you lose count. When at last the servants clear the final dish, you feel less full than you expected. Not in your stomach, but in your spirit. You've seen food turned into spectacle, art, even propaganda. But you can't shake the thought of that humble bowl of lentils, or that crust of bread eaten in silence on the road. Luxury sparkles, but simplicity nourishes. And maybe, just maybe, the two are always locked in an uneasy dance. The villa fades, its marble halls dissolving into torchlight and music. You drift toward an open field where the night sky pulses with fire. The air buzzes with anticipation. Tonight is not about eating to survive or impress. Tonight is about feasting, celebrating and surrendering to ritual. You stand at the edge of a festival. Crowds swell around you, voices rising in song, drums thudding like a second heartbeat. Long tables sag beneath their burden, roasted animals, steaming pots, baskets of fruit so abundant they overflow. The smell of spiced wine mingles with wood smoke and sweat. A heady cocktail that makes your stomach growl even though you've been nibbling all night. Here, food is not private theater, it's a public chorus. No one dines in silence. Children dash between tables, sticky with honey, while elders raise goblets and toast to gods, kings, or simply to the passing of another season. This is eating as a shared pulse, a reminder that survival depends not just on bread, but on bonds. Mainstream fact: harvest festivals across the ancient world often centered on food offerings. The Greeks celebrated Demeter, goddess of grain, with the Thesmophoria. The Egyptians gave thanks to the Nile with great banquets. And in Mesopotamia, entire cities shut down to honor Inanna with ritual feasts. At your table, a woman passes you a slice of roast goat, greasy and tender. Across from you, a man dips bread into a communal pot of beans, scooping without shame. There are no delicate plates or silver forks, just hands, knives and mouths hungry for both food and celebration. A quirky detail drifts your way: some Roman Saturnalia. Feasts were so wild that roles were reversed, slaves and masters, swapping places for the night, with servants feasting while their owners served them wine. Imagine the awkward laughter, the nervous glances, the whispered "don't get used to this" as cups clinked in the smoky dark. The fire roars higher, sparks lifting into the night sky like fleeting prayers. Music swells. You taste figs dipped in wine, honey dripping onto your fingers, roasted onions so sweet they melt on your tongue. The air tastes alive. Scholars still argue whether these festivals were truly about gratitude to the gods, or whether religion was simply an excuse for the best kind of human invention, a good party. Maybe it was both, piety with a side of roast lamb, devotion washed down with wine. The rhythm of the crowd pulls you deeper into the feast. You find yourself clapping with strangers, drinking with people whose names you'll never know. For once, food isn't about survival or status. It's about dissolving the walls between you and everyone else. For a few hours, no one is hungry, no one is lonely, no one is forgotten. And yet, even here, power plays peek through. The biggest platters always seem to circle back to the wealthiest families. The juiciest cuts arrive first at the tables closest to the musicians. The gods may demand offerings, but the wealthy still take the lion's share. Tradition and inequality keep dancing together, hand in hand, pretending to be partners instead of rivals. Still, you can't help but feel warmed, not just by the fire, but by the sheer human mess of it all. Food is ritual, food is bonding, food is noisy defiance against the endless grind of hunger and work. You lean back, letting the laughter and smoke wash over you, and realize this is the heartbeat of eating. The communal table, the full cup, the sticky fingers, the moments when everyone is fed together. Even if tomorrow hunger waits again, the night deepens. Songs fade into murmurs, torches burn lower, and the crowd thins. The festival smoke lingers as you drift away, and suddenly the night grows quiet. The torches fade, the drums stop, and only the stars remain. The tables vanish, the songs dissolve, and you find yourself holding your own full stomach, heavy and warm. The journey through ancient meals is nearly over, but one more moment waits, the silence after the feast. You walk down a dirt path where the only sound is the crunch of your sandals and the occasional rustle of leaves. A gentle breeze brushes your cheek, carrying faint echoes of roasted meat and crushed grapes. The fire has burned down, the cups are empty, and all that remains is the sleepy haze that settles after a meal too large, too joyful, too indulgent. This is the universal truth of food. It isn't just fuel, it's a lullaby. Even the mightiest warriors after a banquet sink into drowsy stupor. After the Greeks gorged themselves during the Panathenaic festival, even philosophers, those masters of endless chatter, nodded off in courtyards, mumbling half-finished thoughts about virtue. After the Chinese feasts of the Han Dynasty, poets scribbled a few last drunken lines before collapsing in gardens. And in Rome, wealthy nobles leaned back on couches, loosening belts, drifting into food comas so legendary that satirists made entire careers mocking them. You feel it now too, the heaviness in your limbs, the warmth in your chest, the tug behind your eyelids. Odd detail. Some ancients even believed post-meal sleep was dangerous. The demons could slip into your dreams if you lay down too soon after eating. You smirk at the thought. Imagine explaining your midnight snack as a spiritual security risk. Scholars still argue whether these fears reflected genuine superstition or whether they were just old wives' tales passed down to keep children from sneaking bread late at night. But tonight, the scholarly debates don't matter. What matters is the weight of food in your belly and the strange comfort of knowing countless humans across history have felt exactly what you feel now. The surrender to sleep after a meal. Your steps slow. The stars above feel brighter, closer, almost humming. You sink down onto a patch of soft grass. The earth is cool, the sky vast, and your mind begins to blur. All the kitchens you've wandered, all the tables you've sat at, all the flavors you've tasted, they swirl together now, blending into one final memory of eating as it truly was. Messy, fragrant, joyful, uneven, sacred, ordinary. Your breath slows. The last thing you taste is honey on your tongue. The last sound is the hum of the night, the soft buzz of an ancient world still alive somewhere in the dark corners of memory. You close your eyes. The feast ends, the story fades, and sleep claims you gently.
The journey fades, and all the noise of history melts away. No more crowded markets, no more smoky kitchens, no more clinking goblets or laughter spilling across fields. Just you now, lying here, the hum of the night pressing softly against your ears. You notice how heavy your body feels, as if every step you took through ancient times has finally caught up with you. Your arms rest where they are. Your breathing slows, deep and calm. Each exhale carries away the weight of the day. and each inhale draws in stillness. The images you've carried, bread baking on stone, honey dripping from jars, wine swirling in cups, they soften now, blurring at the edges. They're no longer sharp memories, but faint colors, like distant lanterns flickering on a far-off road. You don't need to chase them. You just let them drift like leaves on water, carried wherever the current wants to go. The ground beneath you feels safe. The air feels quiet. Even your thoughts are slower, like they've decided to take their own little nap. You don't need to do anything at all. Just listen, breathe, and let your eyes stay closed a little longer. You've survived all the feasts, the strange flavors, the odd rules, and now there's nothing left to survive, only rest. So let yourself sink. Let the night hold. You the way ancient banquets once held their guests at the end of a long day. Your journey is done, your plate is empty, and the only thing waiting now is sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.